to the Peer Review Podcast, Creativity and Fulfillment in Academia. I'm Sarah Bunin-Benor. In each episode, my co-host Mira Sukharov and I speak to fellow scholars and other experts about how to live a good academic life. Today, I'll be interviewing Loren M. Hill. Loren M. Hill, PhD, is the founder and senior executive consultant of the Acclivity, a leadership development and coaching practice dedicated to advancing women and people of color in higher education. She has over 2 decades of experience as a psychologist, coach, and consultant, empowering educators, administrators, and organizations to align leadership practices with equity and social good. I first encountered Dr. Hill through the podcast she hosts, Advancing Your Career in Academia, where she amplifies the unspoken narratives of academic success, identity, and the psychological cost of striving, particularly for Black women and first-generation professionals. Loren, welcome to the Peer Review Podcast.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that warm welcome. I'm so happy to be here today.
Well, I'm very happy that you're here because we have a lot to learn from you. So first, can you just tell us about your own academic journey?
So, my academic journey is nonlinear, right? And so, undergrad, graduate, doctorate, multiple degrees, fellowships, etc. And because my PhD is in clinical psychology, I definitely wanted to lean more towards clinical practice. Like I knew very clearly that I did not necessarily want to be an academician, but I definitely wanted to be a licensed clinical psychologist. Along the way, though, I had a mentor who encouraged me to teach and starting with being a TA in some of her graduate courses. And I wasn't really up for that. I thought, I'm trying to finish my degree and get out of here. Who has time for that? And she convinced me. She strongly worded her suggestions. And, hopefully we have people along the way who do that in a very supportive way to help you build your muscles and wings and skill sets and take them even further. So that's how I got into teaching. Because typically, and I'm sure you've had this experience as well, when someone asks us to do something as high performing individuals and those who want to make others proud of us, we do more than the minimal, right? So she asked me to be an adjunct faculty member, and I took that very seriously. So I started going to faculty meetings. I attended some of the community meetings. I asked her if I could do some of the listening tours just so I could get a good idea about the culture of the institution beyond the classroom, right? And as a result of that, uh, I was asked by a department chair to join some research projects, and things just started going snowballing, if you will. So, fast forward several years later, I was at a nonprofit, and we were trying to partner with some institution of higher ed. And one of those institutions ended up saying, "Hey, do you teach? Because we'd love to have you."
So did you also work as a clinical psychologist?
Yes, I did. I was going for licensure, I was studying, plus I had this full-time job at the nonprofit and I was doing my clinical hours. So during that time, I was spread way too thin. And so whenever I'm working with mentees or early career faculty, I think it's important to understand that even though people will offer you opportunities, sometimes in abundance, you need to be very strategic and careful about what you say yes to and how to determine when someone asks you to say yes, no, or maybe to those opportunities.
And also, if you say no, it doesn't mean you're never going to get a similar opportunity in the future. It might be no for now, but maybe another time.
You're absolutely right. And timing and fit, Sarah, right? So it's okay to say no. I think that's another area that particularly people in demographic minorities tend to not do so much because first of all, if someone asks you, they don't expect you to say no, right? Because if they're asking you, they think you're going to say yes. So when we're asked, then as a default, and I'd say, the research bears this out. Women are more likely to say yes and then be overload or burnt out or spread too thin than men, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so tell us about the practice that you have with the Acclivity and what kind of coaching you do right now.
So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I've been in the behavioral health field for over 30 years, primarily now focusing on neurodevelopmental testing and assessing. So, having had sort of feast and famine, if you will, around support and somewhere in between, and then finding myself at a point where I just was exhausted, couldn't take on another thing. There was a president slash sponsor of mine who one night we went out to dinner and he said, you don't look good. What is going on?
Hmm.
And I said, I don't know. I guess I'm just tired. He said, it's more than you being tired. He said, you're lonely. He was like, loneliness in the workplace looks different a little than loneliness at home, right? And he said, and you spend a lot of time at work. So you're lonely a good portion of the day. And I started crying because I was like, oh my God, he named it. And he did it in such a way that was really kind and supportive. So from there, gave me some suggestions about particular networks and societies that I could join and how they would be helpful to kind of fill my soul and my spirit and just buoy me, right? From there, I started thinking, wow, what if I was able to offer something like this to someone as well, right? They won't have to go 15 years in their career, at literally the breaking point, for somebody to step in and say something. And so what I did was I talked to a couple of my colleagues at that institution at that time, and I said, "Hey, why don't we all, go up for rank promotion together. Like we could do it together. I know the research, I know what we need. And if we don't get it, I know how we can rebut it, right? Because there were some other things that were going on at the institution as well. And I felt like this would give me some more insight into how to move these processes forward. So as a result of that, the five of us submitted at different rank and we all got it, right? So that made me think, ooh, I'm on to something. So one of my very close girlfriends said, you need to build this out as part of your business and put a business strategy together and then just put it out there and see what happens. So I went about doing that, not having a whole lot of faith that, anything would happen. I was like, I know how much faculty make. Who has money for that? But then I started thinking outside the box. I was like, wait, maybe someone could use their professional development funds. Maybe somebody could write this into a grant, or maybe I could have, different entry points for so that more people can be serviced by this and my reach could be a bit broader. And so that's how I set out putting together the academic career coaching piece of the Acclivity.
Oh, that's amazing. And so then when did you start the podcast?
Okay, so the podcast We are actually in season 5. And the reason that I laugh is because I don't do this alone. I do have a social media team. They had been on me for a few years to put together the podcast, put together the YouTube. And once again, because I was so busy, right? I was like, when am I ever going to have time to record? And then I thought, you know what? Let me listen to the people, let me listen to my team, right? Clearly they're on to something. It's like, if you guys give me a strategy, I will execute. So just tell me what to do. I think sometimes when people create content, they like me had this idea that it has to be, steady, like something every 2 times a week, or just like this stuff that I couldn't do it that way because I have too many things going on. But 5 years later, here we are, and I'm really happy that the content is really reaching people that I thought it would.
Yeah, so you said that you wanted different entry points for people to access your ideas and your services, and it seems like the podcast is one of those.
Yes. So the podcast, which is how you came across me, right? Then we also have the YouTube channel. We have content on LinkedIn. We have content on what was formerly Twitter and now X. And early on during the assessment, my team was like, we need to be LinkedIn is our strongest, right? That a lead magnet is the term that they use.
Okay, so tell us about some of your academic clients, not by name, obviously, but tell us about some stories of problems they've had and changes they've made.
Oh, wow. Okay, so let me do a couple of composites that might help, right? So someone who's trying to transition from their discipline, right, their work, right? For an example, maybe someone is has an MBA, business management, and they want to come into higher ed and have maybe an adjunct position, right? So you're transitioning or you're going from industry to academia. So one of the challenges that folks who come from industry face is they don't have this they might have pedigree, but they don't have an academic portfolio because they've been in industry for however many years. So, what the challenge that we face with them is first giving them confidence, right? Because they're like, I haven't written a paper, or I haven't, I'm like, but you teach, right? Because you go to HR seminars, you do conferences. So, it's really helping them to reframe the narrative around what they're doing because a lot of their skill sets are transferable to the classroom. So, how do you tell your story about the work experience that you've had and your transferable skill set so that when you submit your what I like to call your professor portfolio to be reviewed by the chair or the program manager, they're like, "Oh, wait, this sounds interesting. So what is your compelling narrative?" So that's one area, right, for people who are coming in for adjunct positions. Then the other group I'll speak about next would be rank promotion. There is a lot of inconsistency amongst universities about how to gain rank promotion. So, what we have to do first is have people get their faculty handbook. Hopefully, in that handbook, you will find a rubric or a guideline or some instructions about what is necessary for rank promotion, right? Sometimes they're straightforward. Time from degree, time at institution, and then what are the broad categories, scholarship, teaching, etc. So when we've got that in front of us, we have really tackled a lot of the job, if you will. The problem becomes that there there's subjective areas in there, right? You could have everything in that rubric, and then whoever's supposed to write your letter, your chair, your program manager, well, I don't really think you should go up this year. So, unfortunately, again, the research bears this out. Women and people of color languish at the lower levels of rank longer than their counterparts. So, how do you deal with that? Well, you could be bold and and go to your administrators with the research and say, "Look, this is what it says, and I've been in this position for 15 years and I haven't gotten what I don't recommend that." Right? Because that's not going to win you any fans. But when you work with someone like myself or another coach who can help you again put the narrative together along with, as the kids now say, the receipts, right? That can help build your compelling portfolio.
Yeah. So you mentioned that women and people of color languish at the lower ranks longer than others. That's a good turn of phrase. Can you tell us what are some other specific issues that you think women and people of color have that their counterparts don't as much?
Sure. So, dovetailing with that languishing is lack of support, right? So if you have someone from the time set foot on campus encouraging you, telling you about professional development, telling you about opportunities for advancement, then you have it, as we would say, in your ear. But if no one ever tells you about that, or if you're first gen, or are just trying to get around the campus because maybe you're the only African American in a predominantly white or PWI institution, and you're trying to not be hyper visible, and but you are like all of those things are sort of pressing down on you, as well as what most of us encounter, no matter how strong our confidence is imposter syndrome. So if you don't have any support, right, none, like I initially had, you just don't know what you don't know. So you don't know the questions to ask. You're not even thinking about advancement because you're just trying to get your classes together. Like you have to write 5 syllabi. What are you talking about? Is my CV current, right? So the professional development is really the foundation upon which sits advancement. Now, those are the problems. Would you like me to talk about some of the solutions?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So we talked a little bit already about get your handbook. Your handbook is your first best friend on any job. And I'll raise my hand and say it most of the times I wasn't really reading them, right? And unless something happened, I'm like, okay, I'm here. It's my first day. Let me sign it. Okay, I know I'm not supposed to sexually harass anybody. I got it. Where's my direct deposit? Fine. Here's my keys to my class. Right?
Right, right, right.
so great. You got the job. Take a breath, take a break, celebrate, and keep a copy of your handbook, right? Just download it onto your laptop, put it in the cloud, whatever. And over time, just go through sections of it so you'll know where you stand. Now, this is also important, not just for career advancement and rank, etc. Well, there was a time when I was written up. Lo and behold, was put on a PIP, a performance improvement plan. And I was like, okay, by this time my confidence was intact. And I was like, you must have written the wrong name on this because this is certainly not for me. You can have this back. Right? And so then they were like, no, no, they did write you up. And I was stunned. So then I read it. I just took it, I read it, and it was nonsense. It was literally gobbledygook. And so when I looked at my handbook, I knew that I hadn't there were no infractions, right? There was nothing to say, according to section 5.2, you did this or that. So that was another reason why I was confident that this wasn't for me. And then I came to figure out that this was a personality issue, right? This is an interpersonal issue that's going on between me and someone who's my boss, and they're just trying to, excuse me, stick it to me, right? So then, because I like had the nerve to be like, no, this is not right. So I got called into HR, and they were like, well, kind of doesn't work that way. And I was like, well, maybe you don't know your job either. So I just thought, this place is nuts. So I got to get out of here. So that led me to the next step, right? When you know the place is nutso, you got to go. Now,
Mm.
when I'm working with people and I do consults, one of the first thing I ask them is, are there any HR or legal issues that we need to address? If that's not, first top of mind, or the place isn't about to burn down, we can slowly put together your exit strategy. But if there's HR or legal, we have to be real clear on what direction we're going on. And I can refer you to some legal support, right? Because I don't provide that. I mean, I can tell you what I did, but that may not work for everybody. And I don't always recommend it the way I did it either. So you want to know where you stand. And that is why your handbook is good. Now, the partner to the handbook is your support network, right? Who's on your team? So who can you call when stuff is not so, right? And there are times when things are not so, and that's a clinical term, of course, that you have been in it for so long, you don't even realize that you're being
Mm.
mistreated. And I remember one day, one of my supervisors came to me and essentially tried to move me out of my office on some, like, they were like, they couched it in a way that they needed space, right? Like, oh, we're going to take that office and give it to somebody else, and you can sit in that cubicle over there. And so uh, at my gut level, and this is why I also talk about the research and literature around women's ways of knowing, right? At my gut level, I was like, this doesn't feel right, but I'm a team player. Okay, if you need the office, it's just the office. I will just move over here. And I called one of my mentors, and I ran it by her. I said, hey, I'm going to move my office to the cubicle right outside. And she was like, wait, why? And I said, well, because they said they need the space. She said, they're lying to you. They're trying to push you out. And I was like, what? And she said, well, let me ask you this, Loren, how did you feel when they said that to you? And I said, well, it felt kind of weird. She said, stop right there. She said, that means something. And I said, okay, well then what do I do? She said, go back in there and tell them to tell you exactly what they need that space for and why. You are senior in that office. And so I was like, okay, wow. So going to this person helped me with a different perspective.
Mm. So support networks are important.
Very.
Okay, so let's talk more about research. How does research come up in your conversations with your academic clients? Right, their own research, like, when they're doing scholarship.
Yes. So it's a great question, and here's why. So I work with a lot of different, people in higher ed. Some have, they're at R1, they, research is like they just breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? Then I have others who are on staff teaching, but they're not faculty. So they don't have any room in their schedule to do any research. And the problem with that is when it comes time for promotion, they get deemed on it, right? So I have helped a number of people balance, right? Because I do believe that, of course, I mean, we need research, right? But if you're so heavy in research that you're not engaging community scholarship or community connections or engaging with community stakeholders, then you're just talking to yourself, right? Like PhDs talking to other PhDs about being PhDs, right?
Mhm.
Who is that helping? So, if our research is really supposed to be helping move things forward, we must be engaged with people who don't have doctorates, right? Get out of the university and go do something somewhere.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's actually something that's come up in a number of our interviews, that scholars who I mean, and most of the people we've interviewed have a lot of public engagement, whether it's writing op-eds or giving lectures to non-academic audiences or social media engagement. And so it's interesting to me that you're recommending that. So even for people who are on staff teaching and it just as adjuncts, are you saying that that's helpful?
Absolutely. And the way in which we frame the narrative around that, right, is that you need to be able to thread the needle, as my mom would say. Okay. So go with me on this little journey. So we've got Dr. Sarah. She's out there in the community giving her, Saturday morning talk to, let's just say some kiddos who are maybe 18, in the demographic of 15 to 18 years old, right? So you make your mark. They love you. Yay, we love you, Dr. Sarah. That was so meaningful. They go home, they talk to their parents. Oh, Dr. Sarah, she was fabulous. She had this blue dress on, her red hair, blah, blah. But look what she said about research, da, 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 da. So now they remember Dr. Sarah. Mom, dad, family remembers Dr. Sarah. When it's time for that kiddo to be thinking about college, they're going to be thinking about Dr. Sarah's college, right? So when you do community engagement, you're actually being an ambassador for the institution. Now, truth of the matter is you may leave that institution at some point, but wherever you go, they're going to follow you. So
Yeah.
that becomes part of your added value to any university you go to.
So it's interesting because, yes, I totally agree that community engagement is good for the university, but it's not usually part of the promotion expectations for ranked faculty. Do
Yes.
you think that should change?
So not only should it is changing, and I just wrote an article about it.
Okay.
So what I have found over the past 25 years or so is that initially it was I don't even say it was a joke. It was completely poo-pooed. Like, okay, great, you did that, right? I remember one of my mentors who was a president of the university telling me, why am I serving on a board? Like, what good does that do? And I was like, how old are you? Like, you need to retire. If you don't understand how valuable this is, then get out. No, but I mean, jokingly, right? Because he
Yeah.
was paying for dinner and he was, but I did challenge him on that. I said, hey, what do you mean? I'm a rock star, right? I am a board chair somewhere and I'm faculty at your institution. And if you can't see that at some point these could be potential students, even if they don't come to our institution, they want to be Dr. Hill when they grow up. So they're going somewhere. So wake up, right? Just
Yeah.
wake up.
Okay, so how can this change? If most universities don't have that as part of their promotion expectations in their faculty handbook that you said is so important, then how can we, people who think this should change, affect that change?
So you continue to advocate for it, and you also go back to what I said earlier around the narrative, right? So there are faculty who have, publications upon, like, they're publication machines, right? And part of it is, yeah, look, let's be honest, some of them are writing nonstop, but others have built this sort of mechanism whereby they're not always first author. So sometimes they partner, sometimes they encourage their students to publish, and so then they become a second author when it gets published in a journal. So there's strategies by which you can get peer reviewed publications. And you can also do things like posters at professional conferences where maybe you're not in, Scientific America, but if you and your students have 10 posters in an academic year, which is not that difficult to do, right? You're supervising dissertations and master's level thesis, then you help to move those students forward. And then you get to, use that on your CV as well as they do. So it's a double dip. So you manage your time between community engagement and peer scholarship. So you have a balance of both. And as you put your dossier forward, you have a strong letter in the beginning, like, hey, yeah, I usually don't say point out what you don't have. Like if the rubric says, have 5 books if you're going up for full, which by then you should probably have, at least 2. But if it's saying you need to have 5 articles within 3 years, what you can say is, I have, 10 poster presentations and have given numerous community talks and titled them scholarly, right? You list them on your CV and you make a compelling argument as to why this was meaningful. If you are able to articulate the value, then over time things do change, and it is definitely going that way, and in some places has already.
Have you worked with administrators who are trying to make those changes at the policy level?
I have, in fact, worked with them, and many of them see the value in it because, as a former administrator, I know how to bring it back to the dollars, right? Enrollment, enrollment, enrollment. Like, look, Dr. Sarah is going to, her community center. She's been doing that for the past 3 years. We could trace back at least 2 students who've enrolled since then, right?
Right. So when you've worked with those administrators, has there been pushback from the faculty when they've tried to make that a requirement for promotion, public engagement?
Not really. I haven't seen it because I think the way that I have approached this is it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be, right? Or it can be a combination. And that's the important, right? And how we weight them, right? So certainly most would agree that submitting an article to a peer-reviewed journal is a pretty heavy lift, right? Putting together a presentation for the community center for 2 hours is a bit of a lighter lift. Now, I'm not saying that it's not a lift because you still have to do it. You still have to show up. You still have to roll up your sleeves to do the research. But we're not at a point yet where we can weigh equally, right?
No,
We
no,
wouldn't
we shouldn't.
know what
No.
those are, right? We don't know what the weights are to be able to say that. But I think as long as we can say that, hey, if you did, 10 posters, that means you supervised students, or maybe you did 5 on your own. You supervised a group of students to do the other 5, and you did community engagement. Hey, that's a lot of work. You
Mhm.
might have been, gotten off easier if you'd have written that journal article.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so we're almost out of time, but I want to make sure that you have a chance to tell us other advice you have for academics.
Well, I think to stay encouraged, right? Right now, there's some things going on with, the administration and funding, and it is a challenging time, right? Before that, I was encouraging people to stick around during COVID, right? Because people are like, I'm out of here. I can't take it anymore. And I'm like, this is my whole premise around the landscape of higher ed is always changing. There's always going to be something, right? And if we are thoughtful and have support and have strategies and we know, what's what based on what's written in our handbooks, those are things that can help keep us grounded and anchored. And if you ever find that you really are out there swirling and you don't know where to start, then call me or someone like me, because something about really having been there, done that, seen a lot of different scenarios, then we can offer you a different perspective without having the heightened emotions. So be encouraged.
Well, that's very important advice today because I think a lot of young scholars are thinking maybe this is not a good field for me because it's falling apart. I mean, I guess you can say that about many fields for various reasons.
Yes,
So
yeah,
thank you for those encouraging words.
you're welcome.
And thank you so much, Loren M. Hill, for being on this podcast. And I encourage listeners to check out her podcast, Advancing Your Career in Academia.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarah. This was a pleasure.
The Peer Review podcast is produced and hosted by Sarah Bunin-Benor and Mira Sukharov. Talia Ehrenberg is assistant producer and editor. The music is written and performed by the Galactic Ambassadors. Support for this podcast comes from a faculty grant from Hebrew Union College. If you would like to sponsor an episode, you can reach us at peerreview@huc.edu. You can join the conversation on Facebook at Peer Review, Cultivating Creativity and Fulfillment in Academia. Thank you for listening.